Hi, good morning or good afternoon, wherever you're coming in from. Thank you for joining us. We're so glad you're here. This is the October session of our HR webinar series brought to you by your trusted partner in public sector HR, CPS HR Consulting. Today, we'll be diving into inclusive leadership presented by CPS HR Principal Consultant Dr. Angela Love and Senior HR Consultant Jose Gonzalez. We've got a really great session today. I'm really excited to get to guest host. Before we jump in, I do have a few quick housekeeping notes. So today's webinar is being recorded and you will receive an email tomorrow with the link to watch the replay. You will also find the recording and the slide deck on our CPS HR webinar page, which you can find right from our homepage. Everyone is currently in listen-only mode to help keep our audio crystal clear. We do encourage you to use the chat. You can connect and share ideas throughout the session. I'm told Jose has a question for us that we'll be able to answer in the chat. If you have questions for our speakers, you can go ahead and put them in the chat or save them until the end of the session, but we won't be able to answer any questions until we have a little bit of time at the end. So with that, I will hand it over to Dr. Love and Jose. Thank you so much. Have a great session.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for our webinar today. We are so excited to spend this next hour with you talking about inclusive leadership and how we as leaders can build trust and foster an environment of belonging. So without further ado, I am Dr. Angela Love. As Elizabeth mentioned, I'm a consultant with CPS HR. I have been with this team, I think, going on 4 years. My doctorate degree is in organizational development and transformational leadership. I specialize in employee engagement, HR management. I have experience in the public sector, nonprofit, higher ed. And I bring all of that experience into all of the work that I do, and we'll use some of that experience and that expertise in this discussion today. I am co-facilitating with Jose. If you want to introduce yourself.
Sure. So, hello, everyone. Good morning for those of you on the West Coast here or at Pacific time, because I am here in San Diego. So that is still morning for us. But it's very great to be here with you all today. My name is Jose Gonzalez. I am a consultant here at CPS HR. I've been here for about 3 years, have an MPA, so Masters of Public Administration, and my specialties are employee engagement, diversity, and inclusion. Before CPS HR, I actually held a few roles in HR settings in the public sector, so school district here in the state of California, and then municipal government HR as well. So we have a few things here that we are going to cover. So looking at our agenda, the different topics that we'll be covering throughout the webinar. First, we're going to start taking a deep dive into inclusion and exactly what that means. After that, we'll start talking about inclusive leadership and the benefits that come from having inclusive leaders in our organizations or within our teams. After that, Dr. Love will be talking about becoming an inclusive leader, actually going through some principles and best practices. And then we'll close out this webinar by providing you with additional practical applications of inclusion that you can possibly implement within your team or within your organization. So let's go ahead and get started. Before actually diving into the content, I'm very curious to see, to get your take on what exactly inclusivity means to you. What does inclusion mean to you? So take about a minute or two, get onto that chat box and drop in your thoughts and whatnot on what inclusion, what inclusivity means. Just some thought starters here. Is it an action? Is it a result of an action? Maybe it's a characteristic. Maybe it's part of a culture. And if so, how do we know we've arrived to the right amount of inclusion within our team or our organization? So go ahead and drop down those comments in the chat box. Okay, inclusivity equals intentional actions. Great. Respecting and, oh, they're coming in hot. Thank you, everyone, for
Culture,
providing.
making everyone visible. Creating a
Active
safe
value.
environment.
Nice. Not just a lack of exclusion, but actively seeking out and inviting voices. Great. Wow. This is really
Excellent.
great. Wow. 20 messages. Wow. I won't be able to cover all of these messages, but thank you so much. And I'm sure everyone else might actually learn from your idea of inclusion as well. So that's great that we're having that conversation within the chat box. So feel free to keep on dropping your thoughts within that chat box. They are definitely very much appreciated. But now that we've done that, I do want to define the way that we see inclusion, how we see inclusivity on our end. So for us, it really means creating an environment where everyone feels valued, they feel respected and empowered to contribute fully, whether it's in a team-based environment or whether it's organizational wide. With inclusion, with inclusivity, we are actively working to remove barriers that prevent participation. So these can be very obvious barriers to participation, or they could be very subtle as well. So thinking about, our current work environment, virtual environment, in-office environment, right? Those are barriers that can exist within an organization and can make involvement or contributions or the providing contributions, right, within a work environment a little bit more challenging. So again, with inclusion, we're talking about actively working to remove barriers that prevent participation. We're also talking about fostering equity and belonging by recognizing and addressing different starting points and challenges. We'll actually be talking about that in just a little bit here, but we have to recognize that we live in a diverse world. We live we more than likely have a very diverse work environment as well. So just recognizing the fact that everyone has a different starting point, everyone has a different lived experience, right? It doesn't just boil down to race and ethnicity. There's a lot more variables that might contribute to differences and the diversity that we have within our organization and within our team. So that's a little bit about what inclusion means to us. I do want to cover a few more points here of why inclusion matters. So as I mentioned, inclusion, we're thinking about an environment where everyone feels valued, respected, and empowered to contribute. There are a lot of very real tangible effects when we have inclusion within our work environment, within our team environment as well. The first one being enhanced employee engagement and satisfaction. As I mentioned a little bit earlier, one of my specialties is employee engagement. And we actually have this very neat study that we do on our end where we're able to see, based on an organization, what are the key drivers of engagement? And more than often than not, inclusion, belonging, organizational culture, all of those tend to be key drivers of employee engagement within an organization. So it's important to note that it's important for employee engagement and satisfaction. Having that inclusion in there just helps to increase engagement and satisfaction overall. With inclusion, we also see improved innovation and decision-making, right? We talked about diversity a little bit earlier, but when we have folks really willing and able to provide recommendations, suggestions, and whatnot, we get a broader view of what's really going on. And with that, we're able to make more effective decisions on things that we can do in order to improve the workplace, improve processes, or anything like that. So again, another effect of having inclusion within our work environment or team environment. With engagement, we also see better financial performance, right? More folks are willing to contribute fully to the organization, to the mission it has, to the values it has. And that all contributes to better financial or just regular performance for the organization overall. And then lastly, one other thing here is higher employee retention, right? We all might be struggling with this. It's a constant challenge for organizations and leaders right now, particularly in the public sector. I'm sure the private sector is also facing this as well, is retaining employees, right? So when we have inclusion, we do see that there are higher levels of employee retention that come as a result of that as well. So if inclusion is the environment, belonging really is the feeling that comes from having an inclusive environment. So belonging is the feeling of being accepted, being valued, and being encouraged to contribute fully. There are two other aspects that I'd like to cover here. And that is belonging can exist by itself, though we often want to tie it to inclusion efforts. But nonetheless, I do want to point out two things here, right? Celebrating team member contributions and differences, right? This goes back to the idea that we all have different lived experiences. We're all in different age groups, different race, ethnicities, different genders, different levels of education. Maybe we live in different areas of a town or a city, right? We want to make sure that we're celebrating that, and that in itself drives belonging within our organization or our team. Another thing that I do want to point out is the idea of psychological safety. So Dr. Love will actually be covering this in just a little bit, but as inclusive leaders, we have a very real role in providing psychological safety within our team, within our work environment. So I added this kind of pathways, right? It starts with inclusion, it goes into belonging, it goes into psychological safety. And when we're talking about what psychological safety is, there are a few components and attributes that I'd like to highlight on here about that. So when we're thinking about psychological safety, really, we're talking about folks being empowered to bring their authentic selves to work, right? We're not hiding specific areas of ourselves when we're coming to work. We're being our full authentic selves when we show up and we provide recommendations or suggestions in the workplace. And with psychological safety, we also have this idea, this shared belief that it's okay to express ideas or speak up. If we recognize that something really isn't working well, that there's certain challenges that certain groups within our organizations are facing, it's okay for us to speak up and express ideas about that. With psychological safety, we also have a shared stake in our collective success within our organization, within our team environment, right? This goes back to the idea of engagement, right? We're all under one mission, under one values or set of values within the organization or within a team-based environment. And I do want to note another thing when it comes to psychological safety, and I will cover this in a future slide here, but there are two types of psychological safeties, right? There's the leader psychological safety. That's the psychological safety that's provided by us being leaders, right, within our organization or within our team, as well as team-based psychological safety. So that is how folks interact with each other and whether or not folks feel comfortable in a team-based environment. It's very possible for someone to have psychological safety when they're having conversations with their leader or their supervisor or manager and not have that psychological safety when it comes to team environment or team settings. So I do want to make that differentiation here. But all in all, to sum things up, right? We talked about inclusion, we talked about belonging. Now we're talking about psychological safety. In summary, inclusion, belonging, psychological safety, they're all interdependent. Inclusion creates belonging, belonging supports psychological safety, and this in turn reinforces inclusive behaviors within a team, within the organization. So I think it's important we all understand these different aspects, these different components that all benefit from each other and really try to set up a culture of how we relate to the folks within our team or within our organization. So what is inclusive leadership, right? We talked about inclusion, we talked about belonging, we talked about psychological safety, but what exactly is inclusive leadership and what are the benefits to it? So inclusive leadership really just boils down to a leadership approach where we're really seeking to empower diverse backgrounds, perspectives, and identities. And we're really trying to recognize the importance of the diversity that we have within our teams, within our organization, and leverage it to strengthen the relationships that we have, whether it's within our teams or within our organization. And that in itself drives innovation. It drives the goals that we might have or the missions that we might have within our organizations or teams. So really, it's a leadership approach. And with that, there are specific qualities and principles which we'll cover in just a little bit here. Dr. Love will be covering that. But again, inclusive leadership, it is a leadership approach. We're really trying to leverage that diversity that we have within our team or within our organization. There are very real tangible benefits to having inclusive leadership, right? We talked about some benefits, some effects that we see when we have inclusion within our work environment, within our team, having inclusivity, right? We talked about those benefits, those effects. So some of these might be repeats, right? Enhanced creativity and innovation, improved decision-making, right? When we have diverse folks coming together and providing their suggestions, their recommendations, everyone benefits from it. We're able to make more effective decisions, and we're able to drive organizational change a lot more effectively. We talked about employee engagement and morale. We talked about retention, right? Employee retention. But there are other benefits too when it comes to inclusive leadership, and that is the benefits of having folks, maybe you're in a public sector organization, maybe you're in the private sector, customers interfacing with our organization and the folks within our organization, right? You can pick up on that when you go to a grocery store, when you go to, a government organization, you're able to see how folks present themselves. And all of that has a big tie to what is exactly is occurring within the organization, and whether or not there is an inclusive environment, whether employees are engaged and whatnot. And that really helps to provide a reputation, right? To expand your talent pool, to expand retention, as well as provide better customer service and stakeholder relationships. So there's a lot of very real tangible benefits from having inclusive leadership and following the principles that come with inclusive leadership. So I will go ahead and turn it over to Dr. Love. She will be taking over this next section here.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Jose. I appreciate the dialogue so far. Great background and foundation on why this conversation is important. Jose just went over the benefits of inclusive leadership. And from all of the amazing comments in the chat and the fact that there are 270 of us on the line, we definitely understand that there is benefit to inclusive workspaces, creating psychological safety, creating a sense of belonging. And so I just want to commend all of you for being a part of this discussion today. In this next few slides, we're going to talk about how do we become inclusive leaders. I believe that you all, by being here, already are inclusive leaders, and it doesn't mean by title. It doesn't mean that you have a certain position within your organization. It means that you demonstrate these characteristics, these values, these concepts in the workspace, and that you're a leader in this area for your peers and colleagues around you. So as we talk about becoming inclusive leaders, there's some principles that we get to talk about, just some things to keep in mind as we demonstrate these values for others. So first of all, diversity, not a bad word. So there's a lot of conversation around us today about DEI, about these terms, diversity, equity, inclusion. But because Jose has already talked about the benefits, we know that this is still important for our workspaces. And we know that leaders in this space value diversity. We recognize diversity exists around us. We can't escape diversity. As Jose mentioned, diversity means a lot of things. Our socioeconomic status, our marital status, our sexual orientation, our religion, education, veteran status, all of these things are a part of our diversity, and inclusive leaders really recognize that and embrace that. And we are able to really tie some of these connections easily to innovation and employee engagement and the things that Jose mentioned. If we value and embrace and tap into that diversity, we see great outcomes on our teams and within organizations. Same with equity. Inclusive leaders are doing the work to ensure that things are fair and just around us, that we're lifting all voices. There's equity in decision making, how we release information, how we communicate. Inclusive leaders are really mindful of equity and equity-based practices. Jose talked about belonging. Inclusive leaders foster a culture of psychological safety, and understand that it's important if we want to get the best out of the people that we work with. We want to make sure that people can show up fully and completely as they are. And so, by fostering a sense of belonging, um, we get the best outcomes from our teams and from the individuals around us. So we want people to feel comfortable showing up in the space, showing up to and fully contributing their thoughts and ideas. When we foster a sense of belonging, we're also saying it's okay to have a thought, an opinion, a perception that's different from the rest of the group. So it's okay to have a diverse perspective, and that benefits the organization by giving us additional resources, ideas, concepts, and that what makes us very innovative in the workplace. When we look at empowerment, inclusive leaders really empower via mentorship. They pour into the people around them, all of the people around them. Sometimes we see that we pick, some favorites amongst the team, and we constantly push resources and opportunities in that direction. But inclusive leaders are making sure that they're giving of themselves across the board. Uh, that we're mentoring everybody, that professional development opportunities and resources are available to everybody in the workplace, that we're giving people what they need to be successful, to reach their full potential. And so that's an important characteristic of inclusive leaders. When we look at number 5, authenticity. So this is we're not just talking about it, we are those things. And so inclusive leaders are very authentic in this space. That when we talk about psychological safety, that also exists for inclusive leaders. They're authentic in what they say, what they do, the approach. It's not transactional, it's transformative. And inclusive leaders are also vulnerable enough to acknowledge where work needs to be done, acknowledge their biases. We all have them. Acknowledge the places where maybe there's a gap in understanding, acknowledge the places when we've blown it or missed the mark. Inclusive leaders are really authentic in the journey, even in sharing there's a great place in leadership for storytelling, sharing some of our own experiences as leaders, what it feels like when psychological safety doesn't exist, when we've experienced a place where we don't feel like we've belonged. That vulnerability also helps to create safety and belonging for others. So, inclusive leaders really have to be authentic, and accountable, holding themselves accountable, setting clear expectations. We don't continue to move the mark, that the bullseye is very clear for everyone, that we're circling back, that we're measuring our goals. If we're just saying something and holding the team accountable, but not ourselves, not a great demonstration of inclusive leadership. So, inclusive leaders are okay with being held accountable, and not, I won't say called out, but also called out. Like, hey, this is something that we talked about and we're not doing it. Yep, you're right. Thank you for bringing that to my attention. Inclusive leaders are open to feedback, welcome feedback, and handle feedback well. So accountability is another good one. And of course, continuous learning and improvement. That's why we're all here. Again, from the chat, we all know what inclusion means. We have great ideas about encouraging diverse perspectives, highlighting everyone's strengths, equal access, having input from people that are doing the work, creating opportunity and exposure across the organization. So we get it, but an inclusive leader continues to learn more, and that's why we're all here. We're really invested in continuous learning and improvement. We understand that it requires ongoing learning, reflection, and adaptation. So just some principles that we can think of. And sometimes when we see this list of characteristics, we can say, yeah, I do 1, 2, 4, and 7 really well. Maybe there's some opportunities for us in this list. These are additional things that I want to work on as an inclusive leader. I want to work on being more vulnerable in front of the team. I don't have to put a mask on. I want to work on accountability. I want to make sure that I am at signing up for webinars, reading books, listening to podcasts on a regular basis. So find the areas where you're great, keep doing those things. Also look into the places where maybe we can do additional work and get this inclusive leadership to the next level. All right. One other principle that we can talk about when we talk about building inclusive environments is even in the language that we use, it's important as inclusive leaders that we're modeling appropriate language because we understand that by using inclusive language, we can demonstrate our commitment to creating a workplace where individuals feel valued, respected, empowered, equipped, and that's how we create a sense of belonging. So even in our words can demonstrate to others that they belong, communicate to others that they belong, or communicate to others that they don't. So we want to be mindful even of the words that we use when we talk about inclusive language. When we say things like, "Hey guys," can we change that language to team, to colleagues, to peers? We don't make assumptions about people. We don't make assumptions about people's status. We don't make assumptions about the work that people would want to do. We don't use terms like crazy or lame or over your head or for the other guys or for the experts, right? We want to make sure that we're inclusive in our language, that we honor pronouns. This is something in our work as consultants that comes up for Jose and I very often. That something as simple as honoring pronouns you know, can create a sense of belonging or not. I've heard individuals say, Jose and I in our focus groups, I'm constantly misgendered. And I always describe it as this. People ask me all the time, what do you prefer to be called? Can I call you Angela? Can I call you Dr. Love? Same, that's a preference. Or even, can I call you Angie? No, please don't. I prefer Angela. So just in the same manner, if we shorten our name, Elizabeth likes to go by Liz or not. I met somebody yesterday at an event. His name was Thomas, and I called him Tom. He quickly corrected me. So people always have a preference regarding how they like to be addressed. And so we want to honor that and demonstrate that for those around us, right? If we honor pronouns and preferences of this nature, that creates the culture around us. Are there any other examples that you might have in the chat about inclusive language or things that you've heard um, regarding inclusive language examples? I already said some of them, like, "Hey guys, let's give it to the heavy hitters." Anything like that that you that stands out to you? Drop those in the chat for me.
Dr. Love, I do have an example actually, pretty
Perfect.
recently here for the folks who are in HR, right? You might be in HR, writing letters, right? Sometimes, well, it was very common for letter writing to say Mr. Jose Gonzalez or Miss
Sure.
Dr. Love or something like that, right?
Yeah.
I try to stay away from that, Mr. or Miss, right? We're not trying to pigeonhole someone into, one
Yeah.
particular gender or whatnot.
Yeah.
So now when I'm writing letters, it's just a full name. Hello, Jose Gonzalez or something like that, right? That's
Yeah.
just one example of having inclusive language there. So
Yeah.
that's
Another great example and some great ones in the chat. Ask how to pronounce a name instead of making an assumption. That's a big one. Mispronouncing people's names is a microaggression or subtle act of exclusion. And so we can eliminate that by asking for the proper pronunciation and then making it a point to learn it and use it. That's another place where often we see people like, oh, I'm sorry, I just can't get it. That's just too difficult for me. So that's a great example. Discussing someone's weaknesses versus discussing areas for growth. Absolutely. That's a great one, Annie. Saying y'all or folks. That's great. I like it. Honor that pronouns are a part of how someone identifies, not a preference. So not using language as preferred pronouns. Great. Great. Thank you so much, Katie. Perfect. All right. So next slide for me, please. Okay, so Jose mentioned psychological safety earlier. This is a big one for us on the CPS team, and I believe a very important factor in creating a sense of belonging and creating an inclusive culture. And we can create culture by implementing various strategies and practices that foster trust, respect, and openness within our teams. That's the goal. Is we're asking everybody, hey, show up as your true authentic self. Give us all of your perspectives, give us your ideas, share your expertise from your previous job, even if it's not in the same sector. If we're inviting everybody to do these things and contribute these ways, we got to make sure that the atmosphere is set and ready for that type of participation. So a lot of times I use this example. Sometimes if we don't create psychological safety, it's like having an open door policy, but your actual physical office door is always closed. So we want to make sure that what we're seeing and how we experience our culture in the organization matches what we say. So we want to make sure that we are doing everything we can to foster respect, trust, and openness within our teams. That our colleagues, our peers, our staff don't experience any type of backlash for showing up as we're asking them to in their true authentic self. So things like, are we giving people side eye? Are we kind of whispering under our breath? Are we talking over people? Are we excusing ideas before we're really getting into them? Those are some of the things that we want to talk about. So, as leaders, we want to make sure that we are leading by example, that how we show up at the table, how we show up in the office, how we show up in the meeting, is something that we would want duplicated in those around us on our team. Are we showing up, responding, addressing people in a way that we would like to continue on? Or are we doing things that are creating some of the chaos and a sense that we don't belong on our teams? We want to make sure that we're leading by example, we're communicating openly and transparently. This again, everything that we are um, creating for our teams, we should also create for ourselves, right? So if we are saying as leaders, you want to communicate openly and transparently, we also want to make sure that the culture exists so that you can communicate openly and transparently. How do we do that? Leading by example. We're showing others what it looks like. So we're encouraging people to be open, to be transparent, to put it all on the table, to be vulnerable. I don't know if there are any Brown fans in the room, but vulnerability takes practice, right? But we can lead that and demonstrate that for our teams. We want to encourage collaboration and teamwork. So, the cliche saying, there's no I in team. We want to make sure that we are welcoming others into the work, into the space. We are actively seeking out collaboration opportunities. We're actively looking for the people on our team. That can lend their expertise, their knowledge, their experiences, their whole selves into the work, right? So sometimes it might be that Angela and Jose always volunteer, but on this next one, I'm going to go find Robin and I'm going to say, hey, Robin, do you want to help on this? Do you have any input? Do you have any feedback? Do you have any suggestions? We're encouraging feedback and teamwork. We're putting teams together and opportunities together on purpose. We recognize and celebrate diversity. This is a circle back because Jose mentioned this earlier in the presentation, that we see it, we understand it, we know it, and we celebrate it. And so that doesn't also always sound like, oh, great, we're a diverse team, but it sounds like, hey, that was a really creative solution to that problem. We never would have came up with that without your experience from such and such organization 12 years ago. Thank you for bringing that to the table so that we can troubleshoot that, unpack it, and make it work for our team, right? So, diverse thought, diverse experience, diverse education, honor and celebrate that. Thank you for that contribution. Thank you for that idea. Thank you for that recommendation. Thank you for pointing that out. Hey, that's something that we didn't consider. So we're honoring and celebrating diverse thought on our teams. We provide support and mentorship. Again, we talked about this, but psychological safety means, hey, I'm really struggling in this area. I'm really working to get to the next level in my career, but this continues to be an issue for me. This continues to be a setback. How can I get over this kind of speed bump in my career. And so we offer ourselves, we offer support. We don't just, hey, go find a book, go watch a podcast, but how can I support my team in this? How can I be vulnerable and share my experiences? How did I overcome this? Sharing with others as leaders that we also have mentors that, yes, sometimes I come across things that I can't solve on my own. I reach out to my circle, I reach out to my network. I'm happy to be a part of that network for you. I'm happy to mentor you. Or I can connect you with someone that I think would be a great mentor for you. So we really should be pouring into supporting and mentoring those around us. Again, equitably, that it's not just two or three in the organization or on our teams that we're pouring ourselves into, but we are making ourselves available to employ. Now, I'm not saying overextend ourselves and we're mentoring everybody in the organization, but we want to be mindful. Do I continue to offer support and opportunity in one direction and kind of disregard or ignore employees on the other side? We want to make sure that it's equitable there. We address biases. So, again, in our continuous learning process, we're aware of our biases. Biases don't always go away, but we can be mindful of them. And as we go through the decision making or communication process, we can ask ourselves, is there any bias here? If I'm making a decision, what's causing me to make this decision? Have I reviewed all of the information? Do I have all of the facts in front of me? Again, speaking of our mentors, if I run this whole situation and my decision past my mentor, are they going to point something out to me that maybe I didn't see, but kind of comes up for me often? So, are we doing the work to address our biases, to minimize those, to make sure that they don't show up in the workplace and that we're inclusive in the work that we do? And how are we fostering a sense of belonging? So, all of these contribute to psychological safety. When we're doing these things really well, our teams, our peers, our colleagues are going to say, this is a safe place for me to show up. It's a safe place for me to ask for help. It's a safe place for me to make mistakes and learn from them. It's a safe place to take my career to the next level. It's a safe place for me to express some things that maybe are making me uncomfortable on this team. But again, it's up to us as leaders, not just in title, but cultural leaders to set the environment for this type of work. All right. So, how do we empower diverse voices and perspectives? We want to make sure, as I mentioned in my example earlier, that we're actively seeking out and valuing input, contributions, and experience from others. From different backgrounds and identities, that it tends to happen that we have our go-to people. We know that so and so can always get it done. This is last minute, it's a heavy lift, whatever, and I'm going to go to so and so. But we should make sure that we're seeking out the input and the experience, the backgrounds of others across the board. That we maybe say, hey, yep, Jose, I know you can handle this, but I'm going to reach out to Marissa on this one to see if she wants to get involved in this project. So we empower, seek out diverse perspectives and voices. It's very easy for us to go to the people, to the individuals in our organizations or around us who are going to align with what we think we know, the direction we want, the decision we want to make. It's very easy to align ourselves and kind of do that networking to make sure, okay, it's stacked. I found enough people to support me. Let's do it. No, we should seek out those diverse perspectives, seek out the critical thinkers and some of the thoughts that are going to make us pause and maybe seek a different solution to the work. So again, we encourage participation. We're going to look for people. We're going to ask politely that they participate, that they lend their voice. We're creating opportunities for feedback and input. We're fostering a culture of collaboration and we're fostering empathy and understanding. I know all of this sounds repetitive, but this is just so that we're very mindful that sometimes we have to be intentional about creating these spaces, intentional about encouraging participation. So it can't just always be, does anybody else have anything to add? Okay, then we're done, right? So that doesn't really encourage participation. Sometimes it's after the meeting, you go into someone's office, hey Melanie, I know that you have great ideas in this area. The team needs to hear from you. Do you mind if at the next meeting I put you on the agenda so you can share some of that great feedback that you gave to me? You have to encourage participation. Sometimes psychological safety hasn't existed historically, or maybe even at a previous employer in a previous position, we didn't have psychological safety. So we're really leery about opening ourselves up and sharing our perspectives. So sometimes it's going to take a little work to get people to contribute, to participate, and to understand that the culture that we are creating here is a culture of inclusion and belonging. So it does take intentionality sometimes, a few extra steps, not just that final item on the agenda, but going to people, texting, pinging, setting up one-on-ones to get people in the habit of embracing an inclusive culture of belonging. As we talk about understanding cultural differences, inclusive leaders are also fully aware of cultural norms. So this goes back to our cultural intelligence, that we have a good understanding of not just the norms within the organization, but when we think about cultural intelligence, we're understanding different cultures that have come together into our workplace. So things like eye contact, handshaking. What do you do with a business card when somebody hands it to you? In some cultures, you really need to take the time to review that business card right there in person, take it in, show that you've received it, the name, the title, make a comment about it before you put it in your pocket. In some cultures, it's very rude to take a business card and just stick it into your pocket, right? So as inclusive leaders, we understand those types of nuances, and we're doing the work to understand. Sometimes we don't know all of these things. But if we're vulnerable, if we're transparent, if we're open to feedback, we learn these things and make the adjustments. We can learn some of these things through active listening by observing what's going around us. Culturally intelligent leaders also have a high level of emotional intelligence. That means that they have the ability to read the room, right? So if we talk about how can I make this an inclusive culture? How can I create psychological safety for my team? Sometimes we just have to observe what's going on around us to create those environments. So we have to listen actively, listen for understanding, not just to respond. We're flexible and adaptable. So as we understand the nuances of maybe the 9 o'clock meeting versus the 11 o'clock meeting, different group, different level within the organization, different purpose. So we adapt the flow, the communication style, the formality of the meeting. Of course, we have a respect for diversity. We're building relationships. So not just within our teams, but I mentioned mentorship. When we're connected with others outside of our teams, outside of our organizations, we have additional opportunities to learn, develop, and grow. And so we should be building relationships and connections and networking all over the place. Every time, every opportunity, connect with someone to see what we can learn from them. Sometimes just in conversation, when you're at a networking event, somebody is sharing an experience that they have at their team, with their boss, with their organization. It's just an aha moment for us that we can just file away. Okay, note to self. And so we become more inclusive. We can foster a better sense of belonging. We're culturally aware, just through the relationships that we have with others, and by expanding our circles, making sure that everybody in your circle doesn't look like you, sound like you, went to the same school, went to the same college, lives in the same neighborhood, drives the same car, goes to the same gym. You're going to have a hard time in this area. So you want to make sure we're expanding our circles, and then even who we network with as professionals is diverse. We want to make sure our communication styles are clear and concise, that we're not communicating in a manner that excludes people unintentional, that we're using clear and concise communication, that it's understandable to the audience. And so if you're in a room full of doctors, might sound different than when you're in the room full of staff, or in a room full of community stakeholders. So we want to make sure that we're able to adapt our communication, and again, that we're seeking feedback, that we're open to, hey, we might want to revise the wording on this memo or what have you, that we're open to that, because our goal is that we are connecting with others, that we're embracing others, that we're communicating well. And so we should be open to that feedback if we need to make those adjustments. Next slide. So how can we become more inclusive? So let's do a little practical application here. I think we have a couple of moments to get through at least one of these, Jose. So we'll skip the second one. We'll do the one. When we talk about inclusive communication, some of the points that I just mentioned in blue, we want to make sure that we are listening actively. To the verbal and nonverbal communication, that we can see body language, hands crossed, deep breaths, face becoming flesh, tones are rising, getting louder, getting softer, but we're really actively participating in the conversation, that our language is respectful, and that we're avoiding subtle acts of exclusion, that, as I mentioned earlier, when we're not misgendering, mispronouncing people's names, that what we're saying is not unintentionally causing harm. So we want to make sure that we're not in the red, that we're not dismissing ideas, thoughts, contribution from others, like, oh no, that's something that you guys probably did and over there, but we don't do that here. We've tried that, it didn't work. We're not interrupting. If we're actively listening, we're listening for understanding, not just to respond. We are not excluding by assumption. Like, oh, I didn't think that would be something you're interested in, because it's a little bit more too technical for you, that we're not making those assumptions. Using non-inclusive names and phrases or labels, and that we're not invalidating quiet team members. This is important because sometimes we say things like, oh, Sarah, you usually don't have anything to add, so we didn't even bother to ask. Like, sometimes we need to make sure Sarah might just be very reflective, that she's going to take it all in. She's going to go back to her desk. She's going to do the research. She's going to come up with some thoughts and ideas and present it in a different way. So we don't want to invalidate those team members that are quiet in the moment. All right. So in the chat, we'll just do this real quick. During a brainstorming session, a team member dominates the conversation, repeatedly speaking over others. You notice that several employees stop contributing to the conversation. So if you're an inclusive leader, how would you manage this dynamic on your team? That somebody is always sucking all the air out of the room, dominating every question, every conversation, interrupting everybody. And so finally, the rest of the people just don't engage. What can we do? Let me scroll down to the bottom of my chat here. Call on others for ideas, invite others in the team to contribute. But like you earlier, Jose, they're flying by. I can't read them fast enough. Great, great, great. Thank the over talker for sharing. Private meeting to discuss. Do a roundtable. Yes. Pull them aside and remind them of the importance of reflective listening. Yes. Great thought, Lauren. Thank you. She says, I personally find it annoying, but never thought about it from an inclusivity perspective. Yeah, yeah. Great perspective. Call on others. Thank the over talker. Oh, I'm scrolling back up to the top. We would love to hear from others as well. Perfect. Perfect. All great thoughts. Okay. Thanks, Jose.
All right. Yeah, thank you everyone for contributing to that. So we're going to go ahead and close out this particular presentation real quick here, because we've actually already covered a lot of practices that you can possibly integrate within your team environment, within your organization and whatnot. But I thought I'd take it just a little bit step further here and really try to provide you with ideas of where these types of practices could come into play. So first here on this particular slide, applying inclusive practices in participation in meetings, right? And specifically in meeting settings. We just had that practical scenario, right? Some of the things that you brought up as participants, right? Rotating facilitators, structured turn taking. I really like this idea of amplification technique. So when someone's idea is overlooked, right, repeat it, credit the original speaker to ensure that their contribution is acknowledged. I think that goes a long way, right? Especially if you have someone who's particularly shy about sharing contributions in the team meeting setting. That goes a long way for them, and that really encourages them to provide contributions in the future. Another thing that you could do, at least in meeting settings, is encourage pre-meeting input, right? We're thinking about those folks who might be a little bit shy talking or providing contributions in a meeting setting, right? So if you provide pre-meeting input, or if you allow that avenue for folks to really weigh in before the meeting has even occurred, right? That might be something that folks might take advantage of, particularly for younger employees, right? They might feel a little shy participating in the meeting, but might provide some contributions before the meeting starts. So just thinking about the ways that the different communication styles, where we are with our career and whatnot, when we're thinking about meetings and whatnot, that's just another inclusive practice that you can possibly integrate. What about when it comes to collaborating, right? Collaborating between different teams and whatnot. We want to make sure that we have cross-team representation, right? It's not just about including folks from different departments, right? Let's take it one step further. Let's start thinking about seniority. Let's start thinking about the age of employees that you're trying to get that representation from. Having that cross-team representation, not just in a department sense, but in a diverse sense, really goes a long way to making sure that we're making effective decisions. We talked about psychological safety, right? Another two things that I want to point out here, right? Culturally aware scheduling, right? If we're working on a project, we want to make sure we aren't scheduling things for certain holidays that folks might be taking off or might be observing, even though they're coming into work, right? That's just one other thing that you can think about as an inclusive practice, trying to integrate that when we're trying to roll out a game plan for what our team should be accomplishing. Accessibility in workspaces, right? We talked about this a little bit earlier, virtual office settings, right? We want to make sure everyone is able to access the meeting in itself. And even with technology today, right? Sometimes I struggle getting into Team or Zoom meetings, right? So just keeping that in mind as we're scheduling things out. We want to make sure that it's accessible as possible to the folks that actually end up turning up for those particular events or projects. Inclusive feedback and recognition, right? Now we're talking about the recognition that you might give probably as a supervisor to your direct report or things like that, right? We want to make sure that we have bias-free feedback. What does that mean? That means that instead of focusing on personal traits like you need to be more assertive, you're focusing on behaviors and outcomes. So not saying you need to be more assertive, saying instead your perspective is valuable. Let's make sure it's heard in meetings. Having that bias-free feedback really helps to enable folks to make sure that we're being as inclusive as possible of the different personalities that we might have represented within our workforce, within our team, within our organization. A balanced recognition approach, right? Making sure that the recognition doesn't just go to the most vocal or most senior employees, I think goes a long way in terms of fostering inclusion within a team setting. And so these first 3 points here are really focused on recognition, right? Supervisor, manager, maybe colleague to colleague. The last one, multiple feedback options. This is making sure that employees have avenues to recommend, to provide recommendations, to provide suggestions on ways that processes can be improved, or suggestions in ways that the workplace can be improved as well. So having those feedback mechanisms available and at the ready for employees really goes a long way in making sure that we're collecting that feedback from different populations within our organization or within our team. And last slide here for this particular webinar, applying inclusive practices when it comes to accountability and continuous improvement, right? This was covered by Dr. Love a little bit earlier, but from an organizational standpoint, we want to make sure that we're being clear about what our commitments are to inclusion, right? We want to make sure that that's communicated and that that's established so folks very clearly know that you're striving to be a more inclusive leader. And with that comes accountability. From an organizational standpoint, we always recommend measuring your progress, right? Whether it's engagement or inclusion or anything like that, it has to be an ongoing effort. And using things such as surveys, listening sessions, focus groups, to really get that feedback from employees on what is going well, what is not going well, what can we improve upon. All of that is very important to make sure that you're leading by example, right? That was covered by Dr. Love a little bit earlier. So tracking these inclusion efforts, measuring our progress, all of that is very useful tools to make sure that we're being as inclusive as possible, making sure that we're having those inclusive practices alive and well within our organization. And that wraps up the webinar and the content that we had prepared for you. I know we have just a little bit of time here for any questions that you might have about the practices, the best practices that we have, anything else that you might have questions on. Please feel free to drop them into the chat, and we'll go ahead and answer them. But Dr. Love, is there anything that you want to add on your end?
No, I just want to thank you all again for joining us. We believe that inclusion is still a very important topic for the workplace. So, again, I commend all of you for spending this hour with us, and thank you for creating inclusive cultures and environments at all of your workspaces.
Thank you both so much, Dr. Love and Jose. That was so great. I'm really proud to be part of an organization that shares this knowledge and part of this team. Before we get into any questions, I just want to share a few quick reminders. So yes, this session was recorded and all attendees will receive an email tomorrow with the link to the recording and the slides. And you can find it on our website. I'll be posting it all later today, so you can find it at our website in perpetuity after this. At CPS HR Consulting, we're proud to support public sector agencies with services like recruitment, training, test rental, classification and compensation, compliance, and more. If you're looking for strategic HR support, we are here to help. And finally, we would really appreciate it if you could complete the short survey that will pop up at the close of this session. Your feedback will help make our future webinars even better. So thank you again to our presenters, and thank you to all of our attendees for spending time with us today. Our next session is on November 19th, where we'll be talking about enhancing the candidate journey, and we hope to see you all again.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth, and thank you all
Thank you.
again for joining us. Have a wonderful day. Thanks, Jose, for co-facilitating.
Yeah, of course. So it's great. We got a lot of really good feedback. So we'll be going through that in case there are any questions and whatnot. But yeah, it doesn't, I'm scrolling through it. Thank you everyone for participating. I don't see any questions here.
All right, sounds good. Thank you, everyone.
Go ahead and
Thank you,
sign it
everyone.
off. Thank you all.
All righty, bye-bye.